listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Welcome to This Week in Pharmacy. I am the host of this show. It's my show. It's TWIRx. TWIRx. We're TWIRxing today. I'm excited to be here. This Week in Pharmacy. My name is TWIRx, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. We are expanding content. We are expanding collaboration. This has been a wonderful week. As you can tell, I'm excited to be here. I tell you what, it is a special weekend. You listening right now, I want you to remember your dad this weekend. You probably already have something planned, but remember, this is the Father's Day special. We're excited to be doing a Father's Day special today. My father, a shout out to you, Steve and Yuri, down in Vero Beach, Florida. It's been, 51, almost 52 years. He's been my dad. He's been a great dad. Happy Father's Day, Dad. And with that, I am so excited today to welcome back, after 4 years originally, Rachel Yuri, my daughter. Rachel, you were a guest on the Pharmacy Podcast, and we did this on June 21st of 2020. I can't believe how fast time has gone, but do you remember that show?
A little bit, yeah. It's
up on the screen right now. If you're watching the video form, it was the Happy Father's Day special with Rachel Yuri. You were in the second studio. The first studio was Byron's, my stepson's bedroom. Yeah. The second studio was the studio that you were in that we did the Father's Day special, and now we have the big master studio. So, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a good day. It's going good.
It's good to have you here for the Father's Day special. It's good to have you here for the weekend for Father's Day. Are you able to give us any secret plans of what's happening for this weekend and Father's Day?
No secret plans. I mean, just like goof around, find out.
Find out. Or do some swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell the listeners about yourself. I'm pretty proud of you because recently you acquired and were awarded, I don't know how you guys say the name of what that means, earned your blue belt.
Yeah, I didn't officially get my blue belt yet. I have yet to actually be promoted, but I passed both the written test and the physical test. I just so happened to wear a karate t-shirt today. I do Tung Sudo, which is a martial art. And blue belt is the one right before black belt. So I'm getting there.
That's awesome. Very proud of you. How many years has this taken to get to the blue belt stage?
6.5.
That's crazy.
Most of the time it takes less than that. I'm just kind of slow.
So 6 years. Hey, shout out to Sean Naran. We are wearing the Acor RX hat today. Rachel's got the hat on. Shout out to a pharmacist and pharmacy owner that's doing some crazy things out there. And happy Father's Day to you, Sean. Happy Father's Day to everybody. So, Rachel, back to you. Tell the listeners kind of what you're interested in and what you're thinking about doing with your life.
What I'm doing with my life? I mean, I don't really know about life. That's a lot.
It's a lot to take on.
That's a lot to take on.
But if you had to pick something right now, what would you be doing?
I think
you want to be a pharmacist down deep inside.
Not really.
I can't get her to be a pharmacist, right?
Probably not.
You say, and you always talk about maybe engineering or something, right?
Yeah. Or maybe being a teacher.
Oh.
One of those two.
Yeah, you'd be good at either of those.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rachel, we have a really good show today. First thing I want to do is talk about some of the news that's out there. And before we get into the news, I want to talk about the conferences that we're going to. Pharmacy Podcast Network will be attending the Idea Share, and we'll be teamed up with IPC, and the Independent Pharmacy Cooperative. That's going to be in New Orleans, and it's going to be McKesson's Idea Share is June 23rd through 26th. It's going to be a great event. We love going to the Idea Share. Lots of technology talk, lots of innovation talk about what's happening in our independent community pharmacies. We will be there. Pharmacy Podcast Network will be covering this event as press, and we'll be teaming up with, like I said, the IPC booth. I think it's booth 903. And then also Waypoint Strategic Advisors, who's coming out with insurance programs that community pharmacies can sell to small employers, school districts, businesses within your own area. They actually help you to do it. They are like a business development force for community pharmacy. We're excited about teaming up with them. And then Dr. Adam Robinson. Dr. Robinson will be teaming up with the Pharmacy Podcast Network to go to the RBC, the Retail Business Conference, put on by Cardinal Health. And we are very proud to be covering the RBC and have Dr. Adam Robinson covering that event. This is a big conference, 7,000 attendees, over 4,000 pharmacists, 350 exhibitors. This will be in Chicago. This will be July 24th through 27th. If you are going to RBC, please connect with Pharmacy Podcast Network. We would like to schedule a time for you to talk with Dr. Robinson. He's known as the workflow whisperer, and that's because he is good at setting up workflow for community pharmacies and helping you to overcome things that are keeping you from leveling up. And Rach, what pharmacy do you guys go to over in Evans City, Pennsylvania?
Most of the time we use the Walmart pharmacy.
Oh yeah. Do you actually know your pharmacist at Walmart, or?
No, not really.
The average bear patient out there probably doesn't know who their pharmacist is. And I think that there is something wrong with that. I think you should know who your pharmacist is.
I haven't gone to the pharmacy in a little while. So.
That would mean that you probably had some kind of infection or some kind of ailment. So maybe that's good. But if you ever go past the Walmart pharmacy and you see the pharmacist standing there, just give them a wave. Just be like, hey, do you listen to the Pharmacy Podcast Network? My dad runs that. Listen, it's on Spotify.
Listen to it.
You can start advertising. I have to make you walk around with T-shirts or something up in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. All right, let's get back into the news. I'm telling you what, we have multiple things happening in clinical trials, and pharmacists are becoming much more involved in clinical trials and driving clinical trials. A shout out to Jenna Quinn, known as the leader of Perfecting PEDS, which is a consultant organization focusing on the needs of children and medications. The news today, the headline that we're going to be reading is it's pediatric cancer treatment hampered by sparse trial data. And when you read down through this article, written and put out by the pharmacypracticenews.com, Marcus Banks, 300,000 people younger than 20 years of age are diagnosed with cancer each year globally, a small fraction of the 20 million annual diagnosis reported by the American Cancer Society. And many oncology clinical trials are unable to recruit enough young people to achieve clinically meaningful results. As far more attention has been given to studying adults with cancer. So this is a major issue, just to continue to glean and develop new products and new treatments in the pharmaceutical markets. And pharmacy, community pharmacy specifically, has an opportunity to help in this if you could become part of the recruitment efforts in getting people to participate in these clinical trials. And it could be specific to a specific cancer. But I want you to connect with Dr. Jenna Quinn, who leads Pediatric Pharmacist Review podcast, and just know that she's there as a resource. That's a portion of business that you can become an expert, obviously, within your community with some assistance from pediatric pharmacist experts. and just keep giving your community what they need and what they're challenged with. I mean, people are scared, especially if their child gets sick. I know I would definitely be scared if you got sick, but you're not. You're healthy.
I'm good. Yeah.
You're a tongue sudoer. Is that a thing? Saying tongue sudoer?
No.
Doer? A tongue sudoer. No?
Not really.
You are not as talkative this podcast like you were last time. What are you going to even do this summer?
I'm not entirely sure.
I know. You're just kind of a...
Can I shout out our guy here?
Yeah, why don't you shout him out? Tell us about him.
I made him a year ago last year for Father's Day. I call him Tude, but he doesn't like that name.
I don't. I think it needs to be. So for people that are just listening, Rachel made me for Father's Day a hand-knitted, hand-constructed person that has the podcast symbol on his chest. It's in the gold yellow, which is one of our colors. He's got the blue jeans on, which is what I always wear. And he's got the Todd glasses and the little goatee mustache. And it's a cool little thing. And I had to put it up in the studio. So I appreciate that gift. All right, back to news. You're getting me off track, Rachel. You're going to get fired.
Oh, no.
The next thing is, so, we love technology. I can't get enough of the discussions that come through the Pharmacy Podcast Network about pharmacists leading technology. One of those new podcasts is called the Digital Therapy Talks. And I want Dr. Simi Byrne to do an interview with Deepwell Digital Therapeutics. So Deepwell Digital Therapeutics launches ZenGents, and it's a game to help treat mental health. This is fascinating. We know that digital therapeutics is considered kind of novel and new to the scene of different conditions, focusing on lung disease, focusing on the smart inhalers, and of course gaming, and what gaming can tell us in gathering clinical data. Deepwell Digital Therapeutics, a maker of games to treat mental health, has launched ZenGents, and it's the first action video game treating mental health. Launched in Meta Game Store, Deepwell builds the game as the first therapeutic released in the store for virtual reality applications. Once again, fascinating, in the hands of our psychiatrists and pharmacists to dial into medication needs is something of the future. And I think there's a lot of pharmacists out there who would be poised to take full advantage of technology and digital therapeutics in therapy. Can you imagine, Rachel, playing a video game as part of mental health?
That would be neat. Yeah.
Because all the games you play now, what's the number one game you play right now, video game?
I like Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing's good.
I see you and your little sister Lola doing Roblox too. Do you do that one?
Not really.
No, I think she does. I don't know. What do you think the most popular game right now is for kids your age?
Kids my age. Not really sure. I'm not sure if people still talk about Fortnite or if that was like a third grade thing, but that's kind of still mostly a thing, I think.
Fortnite. And then are there mods to this Fortnite that you can do and change costumes and like things from outside other games? Like, can you do a Star Wars themed Fortnite?
There might be. I only ever played Fortnite once for like a minute.
Well, think about that. The future of video games in connecting people to treatments and to feeling better and to kind of delving into what's going on in people's minds and getting more information out.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing we want to talk about, drug shortage hits highest number since 2001, impacting patients, hospitals, and pharmacies. I still don't understand how this can happen in the modern day, but drug shortages are definitely impacting healthcare. And it goes on to say how frustrating our hospital systems are, our specialists are. There were 323 drug shortages during the first quarter of 2024. That's the highest number since 2001, according to the University of Utah Drug Information Services. This includes chemotherapy drugs, painkillers, medications with impacts to pharmacies, clinics, and hospitals. Major issues. Rachel, drug shortages. Do you think that's a pretty serious thing to be happening in the United States healthcare system?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have your medicines and stuff, then bad things happen, and then like bad things happen.
You might go to the hospital.
Yeah.
It's less expensive to keep people on the medications that they need, either for short term or for long term, than not having those medications, which spiral you into a worse condition and then can put you into the hospital. As soon as you go to the hospital, that's when costs explode.
Right.
So you want to take a prescription that is $60, $90 a month, or do you want to go to the hospital and charge the healthcare system and your insurance system and your co-pays thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars?
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah. So it's good to stay on your medications, and we need to get into ways to minimize the drug shortages. Civica RX is an organization that we have interviewed several times, including at the Assembia 2024, where we got to talk with the Civica Foundation through Lumacera Health. A shout out to Lumacera for bringing us that wonderful interview. Thank you. And that's what I love about this job, Rachel. I get to go talk to people that are innovating medicine and healthcare and drugs and technology and what the future is going to be. That's why I wanted you to be a pharmacist, but maybe I'll still work on you, and maybe we'll play like a video game that is subliminal. It puts like little pharmacist messages in your head. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I want to be a pharmacist. No, you go be whatever you want. I want you to just do whatever you want and be happy doing it.
Yeah.
Just make a lot of money so you can pay taxes.
Cool.
You know how I feel about taxes, right? Hey, we got a great show today. We have 2 interviews. Our first is with Sapient Technologies. This is basically, to describe it to you, it's putting PGX pharmacogenomics on steroids. I cannot wait for you to listen to Dr. Mo Jane. He is fascinating, and he's going to be back on the Pharmacy Podcast Network because he has a lot to share. Then we're going to be talking with Scott Bruner. He's the CEO of the APC, leading all the policy and protection for our compounding pharmacies. Our compounding pharmacies are so important. Rachel, let me describe to you what a compounding pharmacy is. So if you are allergic to a specific medication that comes out of a bottle that's been pre-manufactured by a pharmaceutical company, and the way that they manufactured it, there's something in it that makes you sick, that you're allergic to. A compounding pharmacy will manufacture or put together and compound or make medications specific to you that's as close to that other medication as possible, but getting rid of the ingredients that may have made you sick or allergic to it. What do you think of that?
I think that's good. You know, like, you take the medicine and then it does more bad stuff to you, then what's the point of the medicine?
Exactly. I agree. So compounding pharmacy, we want the compounding pharmacies in the United States to grow, and that's what that interview is going to be about. Today's interviews and today's TWIRx is brought to you by IPC, Independent Pharmacy Cooperative. We'll be listening to a message from them, and then we're going to get into the interviews. Hey, thanks for listening to This Week in Pharmacy Father's Day special with Rachel Urey.
Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Independent Pharmacy Cooperative, widely known as IPC. Established in 1983, IPC is the nation's largest group purchasing organization owned by independent pharmacy. With a mission of maximizing the success of community pharmacists, IPC works to provide members with access to effective programs and services designed to enhance profitability for independent pharmacy. Read more about our mission by checking out our website at ipcrx.com. That's ipcrx.com.
if you listen to any of the Pharmacy Podcast Network's podcasts, you'll notice that we've had a theme for years that we keep coming back to because of brilliant pharmacists like Dr. Becky Winslow and Dr. Banaz Sarami, when we're talking about pharmacogenomics and the impact to patient health, patient outcomes, being able to pinpoint, is a medication going to be metabolized by somebody based on their saliva test or a blood test? Sapient, discovering dynamic biomarkers beyond the genome. I am so excited about this interview on This Week in Pharmacy because this is pharmacogenomics on steroids. And I want to introduce the CEO of Sapient, Dr. Mohit Jain. I'm so excited to have you here, Mo.
Thank you so much, Todd. Super excited to be here as well today. Thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So you're the one that got my ears perked up when you said that this organization and this technology is placing the science of pharma as well as helping with drug development and pharmacogenomics on steroids. So right out of the gate, give us a little background on yourself and the company and why that's the case. Why you think that this Sapient is setting a bar a little higher than the average.
Absolutely. Happy to do so, Todd. So just by way of background, I was trained as a physician scientist. So I trained both in clinical medicine and was an adult cardiologist and trained in adult medicine. And I was also a PhD in molecular physiology. And really, the basis of this was how do we begin to advance medicine? And I spent years taking care of patients. And one of the most frustrating aspects is when you gave a therapy to a patient and they would ask, what is the chance that I'm actually going to benefit from this? Mm-hmm. What's the chance I'm going to succeed? And the true answer, as you're well aware and your listeners are aware, is it's not that high. Oftentimes, it's a 50 to 60% chance. So it's a little bit better than a coin flip as to whether or not you're going to respond to this drug, whether it be for high blood pressure or diabetes, or even for cancer and Alzheimer's disease, lethal disorders. And it never just sat well with me. And I spent years thinking through this process of how do we begin to develop drugs more efficiently? How do we do this in a much cheaper and cost-effective manner? And then ultimately, how do we implement drugs in patients in a very precise, driven manner? Not only understanding of pharmacogenomics, as you mentioned, the metabolism of the underlying therapeutics, but also predicting who's going to respond to what actual therapy beyond just metabolism. And that was really the genesis of Sapient. Now, the underlying technologies that we've worked in have really come down from this idea that every year when you go to the doctor's office, they draw 2 tubes of blood, 2 purple top tubes, and everyone loves going to the doctor for that annual physical. And in those 2 tubes, we measure about 20 things typically. We call this the Chem 20. And that Chem 20 really is the basis of modern medicine. It tells us how your heart is working, your kidneys are working, your liver's working. It tells us what diseases you're at risk for, whether it be heart disease, renal disease, liver disease. And it really is used for monitoring of drug benefits and safety. Now, the challenge is there's over 20,000 things floating around in your blood right now. So we're assaying less than 0.1% of that information. And that is really where the opportunity lies. If we can measure the other 19,980 molecules simultaneously, what can we get to learn about the individual, diagnosing them at the earliest stages, and then ultimately, as you suggest, identifying their disease process and aligning them with the most effective therapy that's based upon that disease process. And so that's the genesis of Sapient. We're an organization that was spun out of the academic world where I was a professor for many years. And it was really based around this idea that could we develop these technologies that are called mass spectrometry that allow us to take biological samples from animal models and humans and blood and urine and measure these 20,000 or so markers that span many different chemical entities. And that can we develop the underlying AI framework that would allow us to take that massive amount of information from very large populations of individuals and begin to identify markers in blood, the next 20 diagnostic tests, and the next 20 after that, and the next 20 after that, that would tell us who's going to develop what disease over time, and then ultimately what is the best therapy for that specific individual and their specific disease process.
Mo, it's fascinating because something you're describing, I've heard in other conversations in clinical trial discussions, and how AI will help to accelerate clinical trials based on the preset data that has been already extracted through all these other studies, almost like bookmarkers, where you're saying, hey, we already have this oncology study on, brain cancer or something. I make horrible examples because I'm not a clinician, but it sounds like to me that you will help to accelerate the development of drugs and then also personalize and make a precision medicine forwarding of the treatment and of the therapy. Talk to us about AI specifically and how Sapient is leveraging artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. And you're definitely correct in that we operate at multiple different levels. A lot of the work we do is in service of the biopharma organizations who are doing the hard work of drug development, where it's our job to work with them to accelerate the development of those drugs from very, very early stages where you're doing target ID and validation through development of the individual therapeutics, whether it be small or large molecule antibodies, gene cell therapies, et cetera, all the way through early toxicology and then through their clinical trial programs. And as you suggest, and then ultimately, as you said, and for precision guided therapy in patients as well. And as you suggest, AI is a remarkable new tool here that can accelerate every single aspect of the whole development chain and the implementation of clinical care in patients. Now, there's two aspects to AI, and we oftentimes focus on one, but both of them are required for really strong prediction. One is the underlying algorithmic work, the computational, the computing work that goes into AI, and there's been huge leaps and bounds that have changed with natural language processing and LLMs and other aspects of AI, neural net-based work over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's the computing part. That is the business end, the engine. What fuels that engine, though, is the data. And oftentimes, the scary truth is that it's no longer the computing power that's the limiting factor. It's the quality and the type of input data. So the way we approach AI-based diagnostics, whether it be for drug development, for diagnosing patients, or for implementing therapies, is by trying to solve both of these problems at once. We're inputting very specialized data that comes from our mass spectrometers, again, in which we're measuring these 20,000 or so metabolites and lipids and proteins, what we call metabolomics, lipidomics, and proteomics typically, from a biological sample, like a blood sample, and then inputting that into the AI algorithms. And when you couple these two aspects together, this is where the magic of computing really comes to life. And again, this can be absolutely essential at very early stages in the drug development process, as well as for clinical trial enrollment and stratification, and then ultimately for precision guided therapy in patients.
That's fascinating, Mo. And something else that's come to mind as you're talking is we have a rise of pharmacists who are blending the pharmacological and science with the holistic and the natural food as medicine, for example. And the microbiome comes into play, where how gut health is now being looked at by physicians, by researchers, and obviously by our pharmacists that are tied into that. And you did a massive research paper of over 29,000 diverse individuals, and you were reconstructing the landscape of the gut microbiome species. And this was fascinating. I even had a chance to read it. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is CNET.com did an article very recently that said gut health matters, why you're bloated and ways to restore gut balance. I like bringing intelligent people like you, mixing it with our intelligent pharmacists, but always remembering that current events and people like me, who is the lay person, the non-clinical educated person, and when we mix those three things together, we really come out with application. So talk to us about some of this research and how Sapient is taking advantage of where gut health is becoming so much more talked about in the world of medicine and of healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely happy to, Todd. And first, I would not consider you a layperson in any aspect of this. You have a tremendous amount of expertise, which is quite broad in understanding the various angles to this whole process. So gut health, as you're suggesting, is a very important aspect. And just to take a global view of this, when we talk about the microbiome, just so everyone understands what we're talking about, The way humans have evolved over the last 10,000 years is to live with the microbial world in which we're continually sort of exposed to. These exposures to microbes happen very early in utero while they're being developed in the uterus during sort of the birthing process, and then continue through early life and all the way through adulthood. Now, we have millions to billions of these microbes that are part of our GI tract, so they inhabit our gut. They're responsible for breaking down the food that we eat into secondary products, and they release those secondary products into our bloodstream. Now, there's many ways, and there's been landmark studies, I should say, that really have begun to interrogate the gut microbiome and how specific microbes that are in our gut can facilitate health or can facilitate disease states. And then thinking about how we can begin to antagonize the bad microbes and promote the good microbes through both probiotics, food as medicine, as well as through traditional pharmaceuticals in order to maximize health over time in individuals. And it's without question that gut health and the microbes that inhabit our gut are essential to certain diseases. You talked about bloating, diseases such as colon cancer, immune response, including in cancer, is extremely linked to the gut microbiome. Nutritional states, allergy states, malnutrition. There's many aspects of the gut microbiome that influence human development, normal life, as well as disease processes. And so it's extremely important. You can think of it as the new organ, just like in the way we have a liver or we have a heart, we have a gut that's not only our colon, but consists of all the microbes that are within there. So the way we think about the gut microbiome is from the functional end. So the way we measure this now scientifically is that you take a part of, typically it's a stool sample, a fecal sample, and you're sequencing all the actual bacteria that are in there using something that's called 16S or metagenomic sequence. But essentially you're mapping the DNA and you're saying there's this much of this bacteria, there's this much of this bacteria. That tells you what's there. It doesn't tell you what's functional, and it doesn't tell you what they're making. Bacteria are fundamentally chemical factories. So if you give it different substrates, different inputs, it'll make different outputs. Those outputs are what are absorbed into our blood and have the effect of the gut microbiome. It's the business end of the whole process. And so to give you an idea, when we think about metabolites and lipids that are floating around in our blood, and there's thousands of them floating around in our blood, a small fraction of which have ever been mapped, several hundred to several thousand of those molecules come from our gut. Jeez. And they're the products that come from the microbiome. They're the business end, the functional end, once again, of these microbes that that live in our gut, inhabit our gut. And so we've become quite good at assaying those thousands of gut-derived or microbial-derived metabolites in human blood. And when you look at these, they're heavily enriched for development of certain diseases over time. And so there's a fairly important and prominent research paper that's in the final stages of review here that we'll be releasing soon, where we've looked at this across almost 10,000 individuals, where we've sequenced those microbes within the gut, looking at their DNA, and we've mapped the molecules that they make in the blood in large populations as well as in cellular systems. And it's absolutely remarkable how chemically diverse these organisms are that inhabit our gut and what they make. And by assaying them now in the blood, we can measure the functional influence that comes from the microbiome.
Mo, this is great because the gut and gut health, especially with the merging of the pharmacological with the holistic, has become much more prominent and being talked about between physician, patient, of course, follow up for treatment through our pharmacists. So Sapient has an opportunity to present individual studies based on anything. It goes beyond just gut health. Where else, the paper that you wrote, and by the way, listeners, I'm going to put a link into this paper because it is fascinating. I've been reading parts of this as Mo's been talking, so you have to take a look at this and read this paper. We will have a link in the show notes. What other disease state, what other chronic condition that we know that I immediately think of heart health? So talk to me about other conditions, other disease states that Sapient has kind of dove into that it's presented new interesting data.
biopharmaceutical companies in developing their drugs. Because of that, we're agnostic almost to the underlying disease state. So we work in 2 to 3 dozen different diseases. Everything from heart health and metabolic health, as you just mentioned, maximizing cardiovascular health over time and longevity, heart failure, arrhythmic heart disease, including atrial fibrillation and other problems with the electrical circuitry of the heart. We work in cancer and cancer-based therapeutics. We work in Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and other neurodegenerative disorders. We work in metabolic disorders such as obesity, diabetes, understanding weight gain and weight loss, renal disease, liver disease, and MASH, gut health, and GI illnesses, including autoimmune diseases, IBD, and then other types of common diseases, as well as common conditions such as maternal fetal health and other aspects of vaccine development. So we're relatively agnostic to underlying disease state. The approach we always take is one in which we try to maximize the value of the data that we're assaying in biological specimens. And this is where we talk about going beyond the genome. Your genome is largely set from the moment of conception. And then we know that over the course of your life, how you live your life has enormous impact on your health, your disease, and whether or not you're going to respond to particular therapeutics. Yep. And so we're capturing those dynamic markers, metabolites, lipids, proteins in blood samples and urine samples and CSF and tears and eye fluid, in tumor samples and tissue, all the way down to cells and media that come from in vitro drug development studies. And we're taking that information, trying to understand the fundamental mechanisms that drive disease in humans, helping to develop the drugs that antagonize those adverse pathogenic mechanisms, and then ultimately, as I mentioned, develop the drugs together with a pharma company and help them implement this in a very precise, driven manner.
All right, listeners, Mo, you are fascinating. I want pharmacists to be connecting with you. Sapient is all over the place. If you want to learn more about this fascinating company and the research that you're doing, get in touch with this organization at sapient.bio. Once again, that's Sapient, SAPIENT, sapient.bio. In closing, Mo, what do you want to challenge the listeners today? Most of these listeners are pharmacists in moving forward to become more precision medicine oriented.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Pharmacists hold an incredibly important aspect of the clinical chain where they're really the ones at the interface of therapeutics and the patient. And they have such an important role to play. What I would say is that if you look at even the best therapeutics in today's world, our targeted chemotherapeutics, these only work in a fraction of individuals, 50 to 60%, 70% for the best therapeutics, which means for any given individual, there's only a 50, 60, 70% chance that they're going to benefit. And being able to precisely guide the therapy to say, Todd, you are going to benefit from this drug, but not that drug, is the next wave of medicine. Yep. And this is really where we need to evolve. The economics of healthcare are obviously one that I'm sure your listeners hear quite a bit about. Medications are very expensive. Healthcare is very expensive, and lost opportunity cost is the most expensive aspect of this, both for patient lives as well as the system as a whole. And really, I'm not convinced we need better drugs. I'm convinced we need better ways to implement those drugs in people.
I love that. I love that, Mo, and I agree with you. You know,
yeah.
I've heard from pharmacists, from our two specialists on our network, Dr. Becky Winslow and Dr. Bernaz Sarami, who concentrate on pharmacogenomics, and they've made comments. We want physicians to no longer play intelligent dart throwing, where they're, trying to hit the bullseye, but they only have so much information at their disposal. Sometimes that information is changing. And then when you combined the molecular with the individual, with metabolism, with food, allergies, if you don't dial in, it's intelligent guessing, and it's all you have. So I want to get more pharmacists connected with you. I know you probably are a big LinkedIn person, but if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching through social media, if you're listening to the podcast through your favorite podcast player, reach out to Mo, M-O, Jane, Jain, Dr. Mo Jane. This has been very special for us. Mo, I want to say thank you to the Sapient team for getting us in touch with you. And please promise me that you're going to come back and dig deeper into this and get nerdier, because I can only go so deep as a non-clinician.
Todd, I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you to your audience and the listeners. We'd love to connect and be back here and have a more in-depth conversation. We can nerd out all day together. And for any of your audience, please don't hesitate to connect with us. There's a big world out there for clinical care and for pharmacodevelopment of drugs, and we play a part in it, and we'd love to sort of increase that field and just help everyone work better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohit Jain with Sapient. This is an incredible opportunity. Thank you, pharmacists, for listening. Thank you, pharmacy technicians, the right hand of our pharmacists, for everything that you do. Please subscribe on all of your favorite podcast players. Look up Pharmacy Podcast Network, and we'll hear from you next time on This Week in Pharmacy.
This is Debbie Marcello, host of the Happier at Home PRN podcast. Did you ever consider all of the potential cash revenue that you're giving away? What if you were to learn about services and products that you could keep in-house as opposed to referring your customers out? On my podcast, Happier at Home PRN, learn from the experts who have expanded their services to increase revenue, earn out-of-pocket payments, all while increasing the quality of care in their community. Listen to our past podcasts and join us for future episodes where we focus on growing your pharmacy into a thriving business. And we're not talking about keeping your head above water. We're talking about wealth and the survival of your pharmacy.
Hey, and on This Week in Pharmacy, a special guest, CEO of the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, Scott Bruner. Scott, it is so good to see you. We need to do this more often, because I can't remember the last time that you and I were talking on the podcast.
It has been a while. Thank you for your interest in APC and the work we're doing to make sure patients have access to compounded medications.
Yes, and that's a very important subject. There's pop culture that are kind of blowing out of this with some of the things that are happening in our markets. And there's a lot of pharmacists that are saying, time out. Why is our culture always ready to take a pill and feel like their life is going to be magically changed when it's not even good health to think so? And you really need the balance between what's available and what's sustainable and what's long-term health, and what protections does the APC drive true compounders because of the regulations that you've set, because of the practices that you've set, and you're backing the pharmacist oath to keeping our public safe. And there's a lot of people out there, Scott, who don't know that and don't realize that some of the big names in publishing that are out there that are putting out information on compounding are just not true. Because they don't have all the data. And so I want to open up, give us an overview just in case listeners don't know about your leadership. You've been in the pharmacy industry for years, probably even longer than me. Not trying to make you sound old, but give us a little background on yourself and what you do at APC.
Well, first, a disclaimer. I'm not a pharmacist. I am an association executive, and I have spent really my entire career in trade associations. I'm a former CEO of the Georgia Pharmacy Association. I worked for the National Community Pharmacist Association as Senior VP of Communication, and then was stolen away by an organization called the International Academy of Compounding Pharmacists.
Yes.
It was an organization in need of a rebuild, and that's what we've been doing over the past 5 years or so, is rebuilding the organization, strengthening the way that we serve compounding pharmacies, and it's a lot of fun. Right now, all the attention, of course, is GLP-1s. That seems to be sucking the air out of the room. I imagine you and I will talk about that.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I reached out to you. You've published some writings, sometimes posts on LinkedIn, sometimes giving back to your followers information that is being overlooked in some of the articles. One of the articles that you said was referenced that you were able to have the association participate in was the Medscape article that was titled "The Truth About Compounded GLP-1s That Doctors Need to Know." And this was published in March 26th of 2024. Share with us your thoughts and how you were able to participate in that article.
Well, Dr. Inaive is an interesting person. He's a cardiologist, and it's our understanding that he doesn't even prescribe compounded medications, but he is concerned and frustrated about the way physicians and other prescribers are viewing compounding at this time when GLP-1s are a phenomenon we've not seen certainly not since the HIV drugs of the 1990s, or maybe even birth control in the 1950s and 60s. It's that big a deal. The drug companies cannot meet the demand for the drug, and so the drug's in shortage. And his frustration is that a lot of prescribers, particularly obesity doctors and others, are sort of turning up their nose to compounded versions of the drugs, in effect saying we'd rather our patients do without than to get a drug that's made in a state-licensed, USP-compliant, sterile compounding lab. And so he penned this op-ed, I guess, and sent it to us and said, help me get this published. This is a perspective that needs to be heard. We agreed, and we helped him edit the piece. And we think it's it's the best representation we've seen, particularly in Medscape, which doesn't particularly like compounding. It's a pretty good representation of pharmacy compounding, and we're grateful to him for enunciating it.
Well, that says something that he was able to reach out to an association that's solely focused on the safety of compounding and the high level of quality of compounding for the true compounder and what that means. And have there ever been bad players? Well, of course, every sector of healthcare in the history of healthcare has had, you know, erroneous players that have made mistakes and have hurt people. And it's associations like the APC that is standing for a higher quality certification and following some suits and following some processes to ensure that public safety. That's where your passion comes in. What can we do on today's show to connect with other pharmacists who are interested in either expanding their compounding business in a community setting? They're an existing compounder, and they're also feeling this frustration. Some of the feedback from physicians that and/or other organizations don't have all the information. But share with us a call out to the listeners today.
Well, it's a really interesting time to be in pharmacy compounding. Many of your listeners know that compounding has been a part of the American healthcare system for generations, providing drugs to patients for which an FDA drug is not appropriate. And that's always in the judgment of the prescriber, not the pharmacist, but also providing shortage drugs. Just last year, compounding pharmacies helped alleviate the shortage of acetaminophen suspension by compounding that, ibuprofen suspension, amoxicillin suspension. Those drugs were in shortage, and compounders saved the day for many pediatric patients. Well, in this environment, when such a light is being shown on compounding by GLP-1s, a lot of reporters, even some regulators, seem to think that it's a new phenomenon and that it's somehow illicit and sketchy. And it's not. And so we spend a lot of our time lately working with reporters over the past 18 months, almost 100 reporters, 120 stories. And these are the Wall Street Journal. And in fact, we're featured briefly in a Wall Street Journal podcast that just came out last week. We're working with the New York Times. We're working with the Washington Post and CNN and NBC News. Trying to tell an accurate story of pharmacy compounding, because there's so much misinformation out there. Some of that is fed by drug makers who continue to conflate legitimate compounding with some of the illicit activity, the counterfeiting that goes on out there. And they're two very different things. And so I spent a lot of my time lately telling that story. Here's what compounding is. Here's how you can know that the compounding pharmacy where you get your drug is legit. And here's how you can know that that compounded drug is what it says it is. And so that's kind of the universe we live in right now. GLP-1s are certainly not the only thing that compounding is doing. And you and I had chatted a little bit beforehand about PBMs and DIR fees and all the non-existent margins in independent pharmacy right now. We are seeing a move from some independent community pharmacies who have done traditional retail. They are considering moving into compounding because compounding has generally been a cash-only business. It's been a cash-only business because the PBMs won't reimburse for compounded drugs. So it's really an interesting time. GLP-1s, yes, compounding pharmacies are saving the day in preparing those drugs right now, but there is a whole range of other medications where we are helping, our members are helping Americans live more normal lives because of compounded medications. And that's the story we're trying to tell.
That's great. That's incredible. So I want to throw a curveball at you. And I didn't tell Scott that this was coming, so hope you're ready. So I'm fascinated by pharmacogenomics. I started getting involved in understanding what that even meant back in 2016, because I had an opportunity to work with a company called WellMed out of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. And they were doing a app that would quickly tell physicians if their patient was candidate to get reimbursed, to get their claim reimbursed for a pharmacogenomics test. That technology was bought up by UPMC Enterprises out of Pittsburgh, probably jettison ahead of time of about 3 or 4 years. But regardless, that opened my mind up to the toolbox or the tool that is PGX in the hands of pharmacists to really dial down into very specific therapies. And when I put on top of PGX the world of compounding, imagine a compound, or not a compound, a manufacturer's medication that it is what it is. It has the exact same amount of drugs in it, and it's literally a compound that's just basically mass produced, right? So if your patient took a test and you found out that the average dose of the ABC drug, based on their consumption and based on their ability to break it down and to absorb and metabolize, if a compounder was to take that same basic formulation but make some adjustments to it in order to catch up with their breakdown, their metabolism, and really dialing into the true patient's need based on data, aka the PGX results. Imagine compounders being able to use technology, use artificial intelligence, and dial into that to show the world, for that matter, or at least in our system, we're stuck in the United States PBM world, but really to show, hey, we can save a lot of money by not having to intelligently guess what this med's going to do, because we have the data and now our compounders are dialing it in.
Yeah, well, and in its most rudimentary form, some of that is going on now, particularly in the universe of hormones. You may be aware, your listeners may be aware, that there just aren't that many, relatively speaking, FDA-approved hormone products for the range of patient need out there. And so compounding hormones, bioidentical hormones, is a big part of many compounding pharmacies' practice. A lot of that testing right now goes on between the pharmacy and the prescriber. It's, again, very, I would call it rudimentary, but we are talking about ways to create point-of-care hormone testing there at the pharmacy, where then the pharmacist, based on his or her expertise, can recommend to the prescriber, based on a particular patient's physiology, et cetera, the right dosage form, dosage strength, et cetera, for that particular patient. So we're very much on the front end of that, not as sophisticated as what you've just described, but I think we're we're moving in that direction.
Well, there's organizations out there that may build something tighter in tech, and it'll be a compounder that's going to have to facilitate the adjustments to such a medication or to a prescription. But that's exciting. So what other pieces of technology excite you in the world of compounding right now that's really going to help to accelerate our compounders?
It's not technology per se, but there are some trends in compounding that I think are worth mentioning. With the advent of new USP chapters, USP 795, which standards for non-sterile compounding, 797 standards for sterile compounding, and USP 800, which oversees hazardous drug compounding. The cost of compliance for compounding pharmacies is escalating quickly. There are pharmacies, and in fact, we're going to release data within the next month indicating that a number of pharmacies are giving up hazardous drug compounding simply because of the compliance cost to have a USP 800 clean room, the HVAC requirements that are associated with that, et cetera. So we're seeing some pharmacies step away from certain aspects of compounding because the cost of compliance are so high, but that's also driving some consolidation. And so we're seeing the emergence of holding companies in compounding. We are seeing compounders buy up other smaller compounders. So you might Wedgwood in the veterinary compounding space, Belmar, Empower, Revelation Pharma is a holding company of pharmacies, and that's sort of the new trend. And the other thing that's underlying all that is the introduction over the past, certainly within the past 5 years, and for the most part more recent than that, the introduction of private equity into the pharmacy world. And so there are quite a number of compounding pharmacies that are being supported by private equity in investment right now. So a lot of those are sort of business trends, but those also drive how patients access compounded medications. We're also seeing quite a rise, as you may know, in telehealth platforms. Many of those telehealth platforms are sourcing the compounded drugs that are prescribed via contract pharmacies, some of them through 503Bs and some of them through state licensed 503As. And I think that phenomenon will only grow. In the past 2 years, both Hims and Hers, that ought to be a recognized name to many. You see their commercials during Jeopardy every evening, or Ro, used to be Roman. Both of those are now members of APC because they value the advocacy work that we do. And yeah, Hims and Hers just this past week has announced that it is moving into prescribing GLP-1s, compounded GLP-1s, and those are being sourced from a 503B. I think Ro is also doing that and has been a bit longer than Hims and Hers. But again, both great APC members, and it's interesting to us that telehealth platforms are finding value in the work we do in defending and protecting pharmacy compounding.
That is awesome. That's good news, Scott. I was glad to find that article. There was an article that was published in Fierce Healthcare on May 20th of 2024 titled "Hims and Hers Expands Weight Loss Program to Include Access to Compounded GLP-1 Medications," which brings education and understanding from the patient's perspective, so that when you say, hey, this is a compounded form of GLP-1, now it's not the boogeyman. It's explained to them that, hey, this is the same, substance. It's customized now by probably some marketing through Hims and Hers, but nonetheless, it gives an opportunity to educate.
Yeah, there's a component of that too worth mentioning because I think it's going to have profound implications for compounding. And it's sort of a stealth issue right now. And it's what we call 503B sourcing. So when the Drug Quality and Security Act was passed in 2013, there are prohibitions. First of all, it created 503B outsourcing facilities that are licensed by FDA, but it also included prohibitions on those 503Bs doing wholesaling. So in other words, a 503B couldn't prepare compounded drugs and sell them or distribute them to McKesson, and then McKesson could turn around, or AmerisourceBergen or Cardinal. I don't mean to name drop these companies. That was forbidden. But what about a 503B distributing batches of compounded drugs to a 503A, even though the law and the guidance associated with it seemed clear about that it was okay to do that. It has not caught on until this past year or so, when FDA has released a draft guidance document that would explicitly allow that. And so I believe the ability of 503, it strengthens the business model for 503Bs. And I believe that 503Bs preparing batches of compounded drugs, distributing them to a local 503A, and the 503A dispensing that drug pursuant to a prescription is gaining traction as we speak. And it has profound implications for the practice. If I'm a 503A sterile compounder right now, I'm entering a new world when a 503B can distribute sterile drugs to the non-sterile compounding pharmacy down the street. And suddenly I've got a new competitor in that non-sterile compounding pharmacy. Some people like that. A lot of people don't. What about the ability of 503Bs to distribute compounded drugs to the big chains, the CVSs and the Walgreens, et cetera, who have generally not been involved in compounding? That can have great implications. So we need to watch that. We mentioned Hims and Hers. Hims and Hers, as I understand it, is sourcing the GLP-1, compounded GLP-1 drugs that they are dispensing from a 503B. So it's a perfect example of this model. And I think it bears watching, because I believe it's going to change the profession.
This is good news. That's why I'm excited to have had you on the show, sharing on This Week in Pharmacy. Tell us and tell our listeners what's next for the APC. Are you working on anything that you'd like some additional sign it, maybe get some people to sign some things, or petitions, or any state-oriented things that are happening that we can get more messaging out?
There's a lot going on in the states, and I won't take up too much time with that. But we are very engaged with boards of pharmacy, the General Assembly in New York, on some technician oversight issues, and we continue to be active in states where compounding issues pop up. I think the big thing ahead, we are soon to introduce a proposal in Congress that would do a couple of things. It would do away with a memorandum of understanding that was created by Congress in 1997 that would allow FDA to receive reporting of interstate shipments of compounded drugs. Unfortunately, that whole process, literally for 27, 28 years, has not been finalized in a way that comports with the law. We have a proposal that we hope Congress will introduce that will do away with that MOU, will mandate the reporting, which our members are perfectly fine with, but will also do something really important. Right now, there does not exist in law an adverse events reporting framework for 503A pharmacies. When there is a serious adverse event, often those pharmacies report it to their state board of pharmacy, et cetera, but there's no requirement that they do that. This legislation would implement such an adverse events reporting framework for 503As. It's one we've created and proposed. It's one we can live with, and we think it's going to be good for patients, and it's going to be good for the credibility of compounders. And so that's coming down the pike, maybe introduced before the end of the year, and then will need to be reintroduced when we have a new Congress in 2025. But we're very hopeful about that proposal.
That's great news. We will put links to your website as well, just to give people more access to what you're doing. And by the way, the website is the4pc.org. That's a4pc.org. And I know that some of you are listening to our podcast and you might not see the YouTube video, but we're showing on screen the EduCon 2024. It's a virtual learning event put on by APC, live virtual learning series. It's 6 CE hours of credit, July 15th, August 19th, and September 23rd. Coming up fast. I don't like looking at dates that say September 23rd, Scott, because it makes time go faster where I start looking. And I don't want to look at September. I need a long summer. So, but nonetheless, the virtual event, the learning series, is coming from the EduCon.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And it's hot topics. We'll be talking about ketamine compounding, GLP-1 compounding, what we've learned from the new USP chapters, and also to help compounding pharmacies talk better to prescribers in explaining what compounders can do and, frankly, what compounders can't do. So it should be a good event, and we urge. I thank you for mentioning it.
Yes, we'll promise you're going to come back faster than 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely. You say when. Thank you for this opportunity. We appreciate what you do, Todd, and thanks for allowing us to showcase compounding.
Absolutely. We believe in what you're doing and what compounding pharmacists are doing out there. It's what the communities needs. It's what the nation needs. We are not backing off on the rise of more compounding being needed, with the baby boomers now becoming 65 years old. Every day there's a new, 11,000 new 65-year-olds born or reaching their birthday, not born, and they wish they were born. And so that's going to put a compression on geriatric care, as well as the population expanding to 345 million versus 330 million. So, I mean, there's lots to think about, and we don't see a rise in pharmacies open. We're actually seeing a decrease in pharmacies throughout the country, which is going to create more of those pharmacy deserts. So compounders will be more important than ever before. So thank you, Scott.
Thank you.